You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Søren Friis Alexandersen, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Søren, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm very, very happy to have you here today, also because you are the principal product owner for Business Central at Microsoft, which I think is really, really cool. So global reach on what you're doing. And I've been really looking forward to asking you a lot of questions about how you're approaching AI and roadmaps and everything in the future. So welcome to The Only Constant.
Thank you so much, Lasse. I love your show, and I'm stoked to be part of it. You have had a great lineup of speakers, so I'm hoping I can add some contribution.
I've actually been a little bit intimidated that you've heard all the episodes, because I feel like, okay, what would you be asking me that the others didn't know I've said before? So that's always my slightly intimidated by that fact.
Oh, don't be. No.
But Søren, how is AI adding pressure to the roadmap of ERPs right now? How is it actually putting pressure on someone like you?
Well, I think pressure comes from multiple places. So one place, obviously, when you work for a company like Microsoft, there is just a pressure because we want to lead the AI game, and we're betting our lives on this, on AI, you could say. So that also means that every team has to think AI into their backlogs. So that's just a mandate. But obviously, there's also a lot of curiosity. Like, all of us go around and think, I had a backlog before AI came into the picture. How can I rethink that backlog? Can I do the same things? Can I address the same customer issues? Because often they haven't changed. Like, the customer still have the same issue or opportunity, at least so far as we know, that they had yesterday. Now AI is here. How can we rethink? How can we do what we thought we were going to build into the product, now thinking AI into it? Of course, that doesn't mean that we don't invent or think about entirely new things. But I think, and I know we're going to talk about this a bit later as well, I think we have the mandate to come up with some of the use cases as well. And I think that's where maybe, now I'm going off on a tangent, but when you work for or build a product like Business Central or any ERP inside Microsoft, it's easy to have an identity crisis, in the sense that Business Central is an end-to-end business solution, so containing feature functions that people actually use. But we're also, and Microsoft is first and foremost a platform company, right? Putting tech out there, you go build. But Business Central is more than that. You just don't go build. You can also build with Business Central and in and on Business Central. But so how do you define, like, as a product manager, when is it that you decide to do something on which you expect your customers and partners to build upon? And when do you build out that last mile of the feature, so to speak? And AI, I think...
Also because ERPs are like best practice proliferators, right?
Yeah, you could call it that. I'm not too fond of the best practice, just like as a term. We can come back to that.
My boss also hates that term, but
yeah.
Basically what I'm saying is that what everyone does, it will do that well. It will not necessarily know who you are specifically, your niche customers here, right? But it will understand the general purpose of a general ledger.
Yes, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges for a product like this, is that we need to be so much for so many types of companies, like from the very small, let's say 10 person up to hundreds of users, like cross industries, and that's where you of course have the partner solutions added on top. If you're a dentist, then you will have a dentist solution on top of Essential, things like that. So that's where I think we've hit sort of a sweet spot with the product, in terms of it has some horizontal capabilities, and sometimes, of course, more than horizontal. And then we have a great platform for building out features into whatever industry you're in. But I think like so. I mentioned you asked about the pressure of AI. So one, there's an internal pressure, of course, to build AI, but I also think there's an expectation. There's an expectation from customers. Customers here, and I've heard in your show here, everyone expects to be working with AI or to be adopting AI. We've heard boards saying, "Oh, you should have 5 AI projects." To which I don't agree that there should be a board level decision, by the way. But customers expect to find AI in a modern business solution. I'm not sure they expect to know where and how. That's up to us. I think we have to, in many cases, especially in the SMB segment, we have to be the ones who set the direction and inspire them with the use cases and build out the use cases, show examples. Because if you're an SMB, and I know the definition of SMB can be many different things depending on country and so on, you don't necessarily have budget to go now create an AI sort of workforce or innovation hub or experimental group to go and try things out. You might not even know where to begin. You probably don't have a data scientist. You don't have any of these things. So you need to have AI working out of the box, basically, and do stuff for you that's value for your business out of the box. And that's, if you'll allow a Star Wars reference, is implied in our mandate to do those to think AI into the product.
Yeah, but that's also what's I think is maybe realizing right now is actually this super challenging part of your job is that the whole world is crying out for use cases, and I'm starting to tell people, just make sure you modernize your ERP because they will build something. And then I'm just saying, okay, so Søren, you figure it out. I don't wanna. So, no, but we do as well, right? But to some extent, that's what the market is saying. Looking at the SAPs, the BCs, the oracles of the world, saying, "You figure this out, guys. Give something to me. I expect it tomorrow." that must be quite difficult.
Yes. To be honest, yes, very, very, very difficult. I mean, more difficult than you would think, because I think from
because
people,
if it doesn't work, people will be.
Yeah, let's come back to the adoption part because that's super interesting. So I think so. Let's maybe go back in time a bit. So let's go back 10 years when cloud was emerging. There was this promise that if you went to the cloud and you had enough data, you had big data, you could get insights. And even then, there was an AI, and people also used AI, but there was much more of a steep learning curve and ramp up. You need to have data scientists do your AI models, and it's more sort of the classic machine learning thing. But I wonder if that insight, has that been like insight from data, has that been largely unfulfilled? Not necessarily by the industry, but also by customers, because, okay, now we're on cloud. Our data is there. We have pretty good data. We have ERP and some other data sources. Show me those insights. Yeah, that's great, but you still need to define what is it you want to see. What are you trying to see your future cash flow or demand forecasting, or what is it you're trying to do? You still have to build some of these things. And we had some of those features in Business Central, and other ERP products would have similar. But I think there was an expectation from the customer that says, yes, now we're on cloud and we have good data. Give me those insights. No, you still have to do an AI project on top of that. And I think that's probably what has changed now, is that, as you've also talked about in the show, is that AI has become more accessible now. Not so much though that the classic machine learning, that's still a project you need to have, people who know about data and data science and so on. So what is it that we can do now with the GPT-based stuff? How can we even do finance with GPT? Like, some people would think, oh, GPT and all the creativity and hallucinations, that won't work in finance. Well, that depends. Depends on, maybe you don't want to use it right now to predict your cash flow, because how do you get your transactions, like that million of transactions, into the mix and into that prompt? And so, but there are other things, and I think that's the challenging part right now, is to figure out, where is GPT Copilot a good technology or a good component to use in a process.
Mm.
So that is really the
But it's also, I think, also people when they don't see the possibilities for GPTs or large language models in ERPs and finance, I think they are the misunderstanding the point that I really loved when Kasper Junge on the last episode, right now it's the latest one, said that language was invented for bookkeeping in Mesopotamia, and I'm a historian, so obviously I love that. But it just made me think so much, that writing was meant for making evidence and witnesses for transactions, right? That's why we started writing it, right? So to some extent, language is made to sort of manipulate data from the outset. So using language to code, for instance, so you can manipulate data. Maybe the language model in itself cannot do it, but it can control the things that can do it. There's this whole chain of things. It's all language based, right? Isn't it?
I totally agree with that, and I almost got goosebumps when I heard Casper say that, because I think that's so true. Great episode, by the way. No, I think you're right. I think it's easy to just look at LLMs and say, "Oh, do we want to build yet another chat-based feature?" Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of value in chat-based features and the summarizations and drafting emails and things like that. But there's an opportunity to do just many more things now, than because you can have LLM interpret various kind of things that are useful in a process. Contracts, policies, things that will impact how you do your bookkeeping, for example, and things like that. So I think we've only just scratched the surface.
Or have it interact with an endpoint. I know you're doing that.
Absolutely.
And that's coding. So it's just coding. The LLM is coding.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So you could also, like, anytime you have some instructions, it's a kind of code. It may be in natural language, but it's a kind of code anyway.
Right? And that opens up tons of opportunities in ERP, I think.
It does, and when we talk agents and things like that, like how so you give some instructions, something is carried out, right? And that this is going to be a universe in itself to talk about agents, right? But there are so many opportunities.
I want to discuss that agent thing, because we discussed it just before we started recording this. So and I thought I thought about it this morning or yesterday. Actually, I started thinking a lot about so. I come from an automation background. I think you've heard me say that a couple of times in the podcast. But for me, that means that the discussion around agents will become a discussion between deterministic automation and non-deterministic automation to some extent. So what we have with RPA and workflows and all that that's ordinary, old school, structured IT is deterministic automations, right? We know what we want to do, want to achieve, and we know what will kick off the process and what will end the process, right? But now we have something where people are talking about agents all the time that should be proactive, able to do whatever, right? But that also, to some extent, doesn't it that assume that if we say agents for everything? I read someone saying that we don't need dashboards anymore; we just need AI so we can ask whatever. But that also assumes that the world is complex, right? Because it seems like we are adding these agents are agile in nature; they can do whatever, right? And they are always not defined. So they are agile for an agility. Agile projects, you only do that when you have complexity. You don't do that for complicated. If complicated, you can map it out in just 1, 2, 3. So how are you approaching that? Are you assuming everything in finance is complex? It isn't.
I think right now for Business Central specifically, we're building agents that fulfill a very specific process, like end-to-end process, that has a very clear beginning and a very clear end. That doesn't mean that the agent cannot kick in, or you can consume or trigger the agent somewhere in between that. But right now we think of it as there's a starting point. It has a natural starting point, let's put it like that, and it has a natural ending point. For example, we just showed some images public of what we call the sales order agent, which is you get an email in from a potential customer, start asking about prices. The agent now, of course, takes over, figures out what do we have that fulfills that customer's request, some pricing information, handles the back and forth, has a human in the loop, and eventually creates the sales order or sends a quote. And if the customer says yes, please, converts it to an actual sales order. Like and that is right now the current end state of that. Like, but of course, it wouldn't end there. Like in theory, that you could ask it about, hey, when how is it going with my order? When will it be delivered? And shipment and things like that. So, but it needs to start somewhere. So what I'm getting at is we still think it makes sense to think of what is on this stream of processes, what are the things that could happen, and be triggered from either side, from the company, from the customer, or the potential customer. And then how should the agent behave in each of those situations? Someone still needs to define that. Like if you are now a new sales rep taking that call from the potential customer by phone, someone will also need to have instructed you to how to behave in a certain situation. And in some cases, there might be situations where you just didn't know what to do, because and the agent would it's the same. We're not building a super agent that you could just ask anything, a sales order, or I want to know what you have on stock for it. It still needs to be guided, to be railed in some way. So right now, that's the thinking, is that provide some instruction for it that says, this is the ultimate goal. This is the scenario in which you're set. You should expect these kinds of questions, provide these kind of answers. Of course, then comes all the guardrailing about what not to tell the customer. They cannot just get to know, hey, what.
But that also becomes something. Then it becomes something determined, right? Deterministic. It's what you can only act within these confines. But these confines are broader than we used to do. And you can also say, I think maybe that's the brilliant thing here, is that instead of saying there's the defined input and output stage, which is typical automation, we can actually start it from anywhere in the process. And that is very novel and very aggressively something different for an automation. But it's still, it's more of a role than an agent, isn't it? Play a role on stage, go up, do your part, and go down again. Right? Don't start doing weird shit.
Yeah, I know there are many different ways of determining what an agent is, and there's some official, it can't be too deterministic and needs to have agency.
License to kill.
No, so this is maybe where I go corporate and say that what I'm saying here maybe don't always represent the opinions of Microsoft, but yeah, it wasn't when you say license to kill though. But no, so no, I know some like to think of an agent having complete agency and figures it all out by itself. I get that sentiment, but I also think that an agent could be something or some person, some process that does something on your behalf. Like if you're a band, you have an agent. They book events and concerts for you. That's what they do. The agent, among other things, that's an agent, right? In this case, the agent does something for you. You hand over some task to it, and it can now run with the ball and do something. Whether it has limited scope and a very fixed goal, which in my mind it often has in this case, at least these kinds of agents, great. Then I think that makes a lot of sense. In my mind, that's an agent as well, even though that is deterministic.
And then we build up these more deterministic agents, and then we have a concert of them, and then suddenly we have something on top where you just ask, and then they can activate all these agents, and then you have the whole setup, right? But it's still around a defined ERP system, right? That my point is just having. There seems to be this. It just repeats, it makes sense what you're saying. Of course it does, but it also just sort of emphasizes that we're just we're not getting rid of knowing what we want to do. We're still deterministic. We're still reactive in our processing.
I think, yeah, and I think it's super hard to get to the point where you don't have to know what you want to do. Like, give the agent that kind of autonomy. I mean, I recently discussed it with some people in our community that is very knowledgeable about AI and about endpoints and things like that. So, and we just took a very concrete example, which was about what you also mentioned before. Like, what if you didn't have a UI? Like, you don't have, like in this case, Business Central's UI. You just have some chat, and that's all you use every day. And then on the back end, you have all kinds of systems like your ERPs, your
just
other
a data lake and a
data
chatbot.
lakes and what
in the
have
end,
you.
20 years.
First
Data
of all,
lake and chatbot.
Yeah. First of all, I'm not sure that's what users want, at least not right now. If you like, maybe that's a habit thing, maybe. But also, what if there are, and this was the concrete example that him and I discussed. What if there was 3 endpoints that gave you the latest currency exchange rate? The agent just picked one of those. What if they were not aligned? How could I trust that the exchange rate was the right one? That's the level of control you want to have today, at least in ERP. You want to know that specific exchange rate comes from this specific source and it's correct, right? In this case, just because you might have 3 endpoints that expose the exchange rate in your company from various APIs, and the agent figures out, oh, it's probably that one. How will I know as a user if that's correct? Do I just need to trust it? I think those kinds of challenges from full agentics perspective, like it just chooses what it thinks is right. No, we need to right now rail it a bit more towards these are the allowed sources, ensure there's not any confusion, and so on. You need to be able to.
Then you're also, you're also telling people now you need to get a hold of what's your master data, what's your trusted sources.
Absolutely.
Now AI became a lot more boring and sound like something someone told us 5 years ago as well, right?
Yeah, and I was actually quite intrigued by what one of your previous guests, Ben, said about data. I think that was, I hadn't thought about it that way, like, because I very much agree that you need to have your data in order. But what he said about if you created data through the last 5-10 years and you sit on a great pool of data, great quality, is that data actually what you want going forward? Like, do you need that data going forward to do AI? And and I agree. The answer is that depends a lot. And I think so. Data is not the key to everything, but for something, data is absolutely a must.
That becomes something where we need to transition from what we know to what will happen in the future. But that's everything, everywhere, right? So you can't just if you just sit down and look at records, you'll just talk about how things were, but you'll never be able to understand what's actually coming your way, right? So
that's the thing, and I think, and Ben also had some interesting thoughts about transparency. Like the explainable things in AI. So the scenario I gave before with these 3 sources of currency exchange rate, creative, okay, there's a reference, I can see the source, but am I, like, normally I'm not, as a consumer of that currency exchange rate, I might not have any reason to question the source. It's just part of our ERP. Great. But if I have now a situation where it's a chat and that might be 3 sources, how will I know which one is the right one?
The power of LLMs is that it's a machine with an opinion. The problems with LLMs are that they're machines with opinions.
Yes.
So
it's true. And we will have, and I think coming back to building AI, one thing is that it's hard. Just reining in the creativity of LLMs is hard, like getting it to, whatever, self-validate or however you approach these things. It's very time consuming. It's expensive, like versus building, let's say, classic features where we knew our toolbox. Like it's in that sense, it's super expensive. That's also part of the reason why we're sort of betting our life on this, because we think it is the future and has to work. But it might actually, I know it doesn't, right now it doesn't feel that way, but for some kinds of features, it actually might slow down development just a little bit, because we need to take more time to make sure that this actually works as intended, and so on, right? So, so I think there's a lot more time spent on making sure that out of all the outcomes that can be for a given feature, it's at least not these 90% of outcomes over here. Like it can't do, needs to filter out profanity.
Yeah,
all these things.
But you can really do like ChatGPT did. Like, this is a research preview, so have fun in you're building an ERP.
Yeah, exactly, and that's going. That
not
is
even what Copilot's been doing, which is also still to some extent right now more suggestive. I can suggest a PowerPoint, I can suggest an email for you.
Yeah,
it doesn't work that way in an ERP, does it?
Both yes and no. So up until now, the Copilot features we've had inside Business Central have all been suggestive, meaning, do I want to create sales lines with Copilot? Great, I hit a button and create sales lines suggestions, and you would give it some criteria, and then it would present you with, oh, here are suggested lines. These are just temporary until I say yes, keep it, and now they become actual lines in the database. So up until now, that's been the way we've built all these Copilot features in BC. So if you discard it, nothing changed at all in your system of record, which is great. Now, obviously, agents change that because agents will perform changes. That's also why we need to think really hard about, and set the rails for them. What can they actually do? And of course, let alone how they run, like mechanically, how they, how can you see on a given record that an agent was involved here? What has the agent actually changed? Oh, it changed this date.
Don't you think Microsoft should have, is it the? Of course, I don't think I even can ask you this question, but is it the right place for Microsoft to start building this into their core applications? Or shouldn't they just, let's see for 2 years how this will work in MS Paint?
No, I think
that's what you said. You're betting your life on it. I think that's really brave. Also, I'm saying, Microsoft ERP system providers will fix this for most companies, right? Tons of pressure on someone like you.
There is, but I think we have to do it. I mean, there's an expectation from the customers, like that there will be AI. I think we have to choose wisely the scenarios. So we make sure that, and we do this in all kinds of ways. One thing is the scenario itself. Is it a low risk scenario? Up until now, we haven't had scenarios where there's been external communications, like email back and forth, like the sales order agent, which will have that element. So it better say something nice. But that's also why you have human in the loop. Let's say the desired places before it sends something, right? And over time, you could dial up the autonomy level to say, I don't need to be involved. So it runs for a month or two, you get comfortable with it and says, oh, this probably works fine. Then you dial up autonomy to, I don't know, 80, 90, 100%.
Yeah, then you do controlling instead that is doing what it's supposed to do, right?
But it also goes to one, then let's say we then decide on a feature that is like, it involves your financials, it actually registers new invoices or whatever. Well, then there are mechanisms to try to safeguard it, right? And I think we will, at least for a time still, always have to build in these human in the loop points. Like, what are the maximum human in the loop points we need? Make sure that that's maybe the starting point, or when you configure the agent, when you enable the agent, because that's an opt-in thing, right?
But this way you're thinking here, that's exactly what we need to put out there. And I'm really happy that we're talking about this right now, because I said that a couple of weeks ago, so when we need to start designing our human in the loop. That's the task we have right now. It's not about getting some kind of AI to do whatever. It doesn't really matter what they're developing right now. Cutting edge tech is so last year. fun actually, because it is. But let's say we need to design the human in the loop thing. That's the most important thing, and that's what you're saying that you're actually giving a lot of thought to in Business Central in general.
Absolutely, and right now one of the things that I'm working in was where we call the payables bookkeeper agent, which is intended to take an invoice coming in from a vendor through the entire process of OCRing it and capturing the information, registering it as an invoice, basically, right, and then eventually posting it. So the first thing we had to do there was to say, okay, in this entire chain of process, where, like in a non-AI world, in today's world, where would there be human in the loop? Oh, you probably want to validate the invoice when it comes in. Is this even a valid invoice? Okay, great. Now you got the OCR information. Now we can start validating, is the vendor correct? Is the bank account number the same as the one we know on that vendor? Like, is there some anti-fraud mechanisms in there? Does the vendor even exist in our ERP at this point? Should we assist with creating it? Like, we have the information, things like that. All these points where there are human in the loops today, and then we can think about how can we avoid having human in the loop. Not meaning we cut out the human in because we want to, but like, is there an automation process in that? Is there an opportunity to say you don't need to be in the loop here? At least you decide. Of course, you will check the mark to say I don't need to unless something happens. And in a classical world before AI, this kind of process would have human in the loop a few places, and the final one be about approving the invoice based on a certain amount.
But isn't it also deciding how the human will be in the loop in another level hierarchically, saying that you don't have to look at each vendor we're creating, but you should look at the total sum once a week or something like that. Is that also part of the design phase?
Yeah, and it could be that we figure out also based because we talk a lot with our customers when we design this.
Because I'm very much saying not human out of the loop, but human in the loop. Figure out where to put it.
It needs to be a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So when the human is in the loop, it should be because it's valuable.
Yeah.
Like right.
Yeah.
If the AI can do it without the human to a 99% quality degree, maybe it's fine to not have the human in the loop. So only inform about outliers. That should be the ultimate goal, right? You should trust it so much that it's only the outliers, or this amount seems unusually high, or things like that. And there's just so many things when we talk about LLMs. In this kind of process, there's so many great opportunities for LLMs.
There's so many things where we don't do these kind of controlling, right? That's what you're saying as well in systems. We just trust they do it. And we need to get to the same level of trust in the AI agent, right?
Yeah. And so just this week, I spoke to a customer, and they did exactly this, where the invoice comes in. One of the first things they do, because they come in through an email mailbox, and then they have automated this today, but there's always a human in the loop to just go and say, oh, the vendor bank account information on the invoice, is that the same bank account that we have registered on that vendor? Because it's a typical thing to do fraud with. Someone sends in a PDF to a mailbox hoping it would just fly straight through and they get paid. But what if you don't need to have the human in the loop? Like, you only need to have a human loop if there is a difference.
Yeah.
Why should a human go and check if there's a difference? Like that. So that's the thinking, right?
Makes sense. And Søren, we already mentioned the episode with Casper, and the reason we mentioned that is obviously also because he, as you said, I think in the comment that when you said you were looking forward to it because he was your brother from another backlog. I really, really love that phrase. By the way, made me laugh, made people laugh. I know it's so someone that comments like, that's a brilliant comment. I know my brother from another backlog, because he's also working in accounting software.
Yes.
But some of the things that he said in that episode, I really want to discuss that with you as well. So more than we've already done. So he spoke about one of the issues he had, and this brings me to the suggestive thing, is that how do you finish a thought when people have no thoughts? So how can I recommend someone, to use an account if they don't know anything about what account would be the right one? So he's obviously working with an accounting software for very small firms where people are, very good at, I don't know, carpentry or something like that. And then they use Dinero. So they don't know anything about accounting, maybe. But in Business Central, you can assume people will know more because it's more complex. But how do you do that? How would you, recommend something to people? And are you even allowed to? Is an LLM allowed to recommend things?
Yeah, it's something that we think about a lot these days, because you're right. I mean, what Casper and team is working at, I mean, they're, as you say, their typical customer base are not accountants and do not come with a financial background, whereas most of our accountants do. Like they are accountants. So we're experimenting with a few different concepts right now. Which is what if you had your accounting policies, how you typically handle your rent or your phone bills. What if that was written in a document somewhere that says, oh, we typically use this account for this, and when we buy insurance, we typically use this account. Then the LLM could interpret that document and say, oh, this is our knowledge base of the accounting in our company. Of course, many people don't have that kind of document. You have to be a fairly large organization, I think, before you have that kind of described in a document. Your typical small business definitely won't have it. But then you may have something else. You may have been using the product for 12 months, so you have history. So history could play a part in describing now some rules or some skills that we use to suggest what is the right account to use for insurance or under these circumstances. So I think there's a challenge that we're now trying to sort of set out to solve, which is for AI to suggest an account that becomes a line on a purchase invoice, for example. Even though you stop before actually posting it. So there's a human in the loop. Let's just say that in this case, it needs to be reliable in the sense like this is a space where we cannot live with the typical creativity of LLMs. So how do we come from something that has the creativity, LLMs, and you have maybe some history, and how can we combine all this to something that is more static in a way?
Yeah, but
so can you combine LLMs?
There's a fine line here, right?
Yeah.
Between you providing a system and you providing an outsourcing solution. Because, and this is just what I think right now, or is there a fine line? Maybe there isn't. So if the LM is doing everything, if your agents and BC is recommending doing all of it, it's an outsourcing solution, isn't it?
Yeah, but you've still given it some sources. You've still given it some rails, some operating.
Yeah, but you do that
right?
also with an outsourcing partner, right? But what if you do something that you're not supposed to do? Are you liable?
End of the day, it's always the customer that's liable, and we need to design the systems in a way that they eventually hit the button.
But you get where I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
No, yeah, sure.
But if it's an outsourcing solution, if you outsource something, your payroll to an outsourcing provider, they're responsible for what they do, right? But
I think, and this comes back to what we need to solve. We need to solve that.
So that's outcome-based contracts again. Is that what? Okay. Sorry, my head is spinning. So are we getting to some, a software? I think my old employer, HFS Research, said that not software as a service, but service as a software. And that's exactly this, right? That's where you outsource. Software becomes an outsourcing service, and it becomes about outcomes more than outputs. And the liability, there's something here. But can you see where I'm getting at?
Yeah. I think we have. I mean, on the positive side, we know what the outcome is supposed to be. We know, like for this specific, like in this specific agent. I mean, I don't know if you were speaking more like general, but in this specific case, we know what is the acceptable outcome. Like, it needs to end up to be this document.
But you still choose an account. That's my point.
Yeah,
you still choose an account. You have their account, a list of accounts, but you choose an account.
And I think but that's not flying blind, right? You have quite a few ways to do that. Like even just with Copilot.
But outsourcing providers don't fly blind either.
No. So what are you getting at? Sorry, can you?
So what I'm getting at is, so to some extent, that when you have a whole host of agents in your software that do things and have opinions, then suddenly you become more, you're both providing the software and the outsourcing team that will make recommendations and take decisions, and those agents become part of the software.
Yeah.
So it's not software as a service; it's service as a software. And that's why I'm saying, are you liable then for what they're doing suddenly, like an outsourcing party would be? You say, no, we don't. But isn't that where software is going? Maybe just philosophical. I'm not saying Microsoft, you're now liable for everything if Søren says yes. But is that where we're going with this? Obviously you have your terms and everything, but maybe someone will come out and say, hey, okay.
I think I'm going to give you as kind of a non-answer because I don't know the answer to that. I think we need to work on the trust piece. We need to show that this works well, so that you will trust it like you would trust your outsourcing partner. And when you then dial up the autonomy and says, I'm okay with it, just in this case, post this invoice automatically, then it's because you have trusted it to do so. But we need to gain that trust by showing that the features will work as well as we think they will. You've said this a number of times in your show that we don't give machines the same number of chances as we do humans, because humans are allowed to fail, machines are not. So there's definitely a risk there that if we put something out there and it doesn't work as well as that person would expect or the company would expect, will we get a second chance? What we typically forget is that people do a lot of mistakes. And in this specific case with this kind of agent where you register invoices, people do tons of mistakes.
They also have liabilities, right? So would you as a software have the same liability as an outsourcing provider would have? That's my point. Would Casper, when he's recommending someone who doesn't know, is Dinero then in the end responsible for the outcome? And then you have a legal, I don't know. I'm not legal attorney.
No. So on a more sort of philosophical question, that's super interesting. Philosophical level, it's a super interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. I'm pretty sure with Microsoft we find all kinds of ways to say, you click this button and when you enable agent, then you have the responsibility. It's your system, and you test it and so on. But it's an interesting thing. It comes back to a bit. I think Ben also talked about this in the episode where he was saying like this thing where you go to the doctor, you see your MRI scan, what the doctor now tells you of what he sees in the picture. Is that doctor reliable for telling you, whatever that person tells you? When I go to the bank and there's I can't get a loan because there's some AI saying, this person is not, you can't do a loan for Søren. Like, one thing is, who's liable for that? I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin to sort of address or get that transparency, right? And the person on the other side of the table who's just conveying the information from the AI maybe doesn't even know why. What is the reason why Søren can't get this loan? Just to take an example. So I think the next years will.
It's one of the questions. Yeah,
it's one of the questions.
One of the big questions that people are not really asking necessarily.
Yeah, and in my mind, I would like people to. I mean, also in ERP, not just specifically BC, but I would like it to be visible to people. Like, what is, at least from the intention perspective, what does this agent intend to do, and what does this Copilot feature intend to do? And I think
this is why it's interesting what Casper said with finishing thought that people don't have, because what are you doing then?
It can only work on the context it has, right? And context we can provide in various forms.
Also, only work when someone is able to validate what it's doing, right?
Yeah, and that kind of some of the validation, of course, happens before we release a feature, right? Because we test it as well. So, but of course, we don't know what kind of data, or we don't know the specific data.
Okay, but the terrible scenario here. So you have companies say, okay, agents are handling most of this, so we'll just put our student helper to look at everything is just running smoothly, but she doesn't know anything about accounting. So can he validate it? Does he have a thought? And if you don't validate what you're doing, what the agent is doing, is the agent, do you see?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important that when we design these things, at least we design in some human in the loop points where you can start it in a mode where it's non-intrusive in a way, run it for some time until you've seen that it works to the level of reliability and so on that you trust, and then you add the final.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think you're doing it the right way. I'm just philosophizing around it, right? Also saying, how do we get these senior accountants who will know what's right if no one is ever a junior accountant anymore, because now BC automated that. That's the next question, right? Obviously. So it's just tons of things here that we'll see where it goes, right, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely.
But things are there's some lines and some responsibility lines and some validation line, around this that I think is just super interesting.
Absolutely. And I can also say that testing these features, validating these features is a totally different ball game than testing classic ERP
and that also
features.
requires quite the senior product owner, doesn't it, Søren?
Product owners, engineers, I would say engineers, big kudos to our people there, because they're just one thing that, I've always been blessed with working with great engineers in Microsoft, and I mean, what all of us actually have had to skill up on these last couple of years, it's mind blowing, and it's new for all of us. I know you also talk about this thing about best practice, and but it is so new, right? Yeah. It's so new, so just having to establish processes around it, like validation frameworks and test and tools and things like that. Oh man, it's
a concept like RAG, right? Didn't exist before summer of 23, right? No, you have to remember that.
It's crazy, and that is probably like from a product owner perspective, it's one of these skills that we would have to acquire. Like every time I would think up a new feature today, which would have to be about Copilot, of course, the first thing I would have to go do and say, can this even be done? I'm used to knowing my toolbox, but in this day and age, I don't know the toolbox anymore in the sense of, I had this code available. Now I have GPT. The first thing I have to do is basically to go and say, oh, let me just try to do some simple prompting and see.
Yeah, because you need to see.
It's kind of a proof of concept.
Does it know? Does it have a pre-built knowledge base that will make it proficient in working on this case? And people are like, oh yeah, well, you probably know if this will work. Yeah, but sometimes it works on this customer's invoices. It just understands, but this one's, which are simpler than it doesn't. And I don't know why.
For some reason.
For some weird reason, right? But we have to test it, and that's why I see a lot of people saying, "Oh, you don't need the POCs. We know this works. We know this." No, I actually don't. I need to test if it has the feature every time, and it's not because I want to do POCs. I hate it. I think it's. I used to say with RPA that I don't need a POC. Of course, you can automate IT with IT because that's what you did, right? But that IT is all about automation, right? But in this case, I actually need maybe not a POC, but a POU. That sounds weird. Proof of understanding, right?
Yeah, and this starts already before designing anything. So a person like me would probably go and say, I have this idea. I've tried to do some preliminary prompting in various ways, and that's, this is where it gets tricky because I have my way of prompting, you have your way of prompting. There's not a corporate-wide way of prompting like there will be a corporate best practice to how you write good code for PC, right? So how am I even qualified to do that POC with my prompting?
Yeah.
So I would work with engineers to say, hey, could you take a look at this and try to do your prompting, and let's see if you get a different result.
I love this because I always say, people are saying that this will automate, 20-30% of developer time, or I don't know, something like that. Some numbers around that ballpark. But then if you look at how, like Angela Wick said, only they only spend 20% of their time developing developers, right? So your automation is only 20% of 20%, and that's 4%, right? And you're saying now that you have to spend even more time also checking, does my prompt is it even the same? I might get more productive, but if I don't align with people around me, it doesn't matter that I get more productive. And that's, that's where I think LLMs are taking the autist out of humans and making us even more social creatures. And I think that's brilliant. There's something beautiful around this, I think.
Oh yeah, I like that thought. And I think it's, before LLMs...
More meetings.
As long as they're good meetings. And by the way, about this thing about being productive, there's been some slashing of, why do we chase productivity? What should be the next thing for AI and so on? But I actually think there's nothing wrong with chasing productivity. We've been chasing productivity for hundreds of years, and we will keep doing so for forever, because we always need to find ways, or we always try to find ways to do things smarter and better and cheaper and faster and so on. My favorite quote, at least also at home, is
from Daft Punk. Working harder. No, that was not what you were going to say.
No. That's a good one. No one likes to do the dishes.
No
one wants to do the dishes. We invented the dishwasher because we wanted to spend our time better. It's one of my favorite inventions, by the way. but no one wants to do that. And productivity is just, I won't say that's what it's all about, but as I think Ben also said, that with productivity, people move up the value chain.
Yeah.
And then productivity is an enabler for new opportunities, for
more thought,
better top line, and so on. So it might be that you could say, oh yeah, but is it only able to create a summary or draft an email? Well, that's value in itself. Of course, it needs to do it well for it to be valuable.
Yeah, but that's also why I think that's super valid. Also because it sort of counters the whole replace humans thought, which I think is a fallacy, a really big fallacy right now in the market, right? Because we've never invented anything that didn't mean that we invented something more complex we wanted to do. It's never ever happened before. So okay, I can't say that because it's always been like that. It will always continue to be like that, obviously. But the jury is definitely out on that. So I stand to be corrected, but I don't think that that we will get to some point where we will not have that. And that's why, productivity is, doing all these things so we can enable ourselves to go for more complexity, right?
Absolutely. And as you've also said a couple of times in the show, is that we will always find, we will always add to that complexity. We always find some more complex stuff. So I'm not too worried about that either, even also just for Business Central. Like the features we're building in are not going to replace anyone. At worst, they're going to allow some people to move up the value chain. So people
and remove some of the backlogs that companies have as well.
You move some of the backlogs, some of the dishes they have to do every day. That no one thinks it's fun to sit and register invoices all day. I mean, no one likes that, right? You can do more controlling. You can do more other financial stuff. I know that some CFOs that they would like to have some of these people do more of that stuff instead of spending time validating if that vendor bank account is the same, like those kind of things.
Yes, exactly. So I said that, how do you finish a thought when people have no thoughts, right? A little bit more subtly, how do you, and this is, we've been already touching, how do you decide what to build when customers have no clue right now what they want, right? A realized need is always easier, isn't it? So when you go to your customers, they say, or your partners, I guess you talk a lot with your partners, they will say, oh, we need this feature because it's a realized need out there. But are you then pushing that in some other backlog, or because you have to invent and explore with AI?
So
I don't think customers are coming to you with AI cases, are they?
Not to the degree that we would like.
No.
I think so. We don't have the same inflow of ideas that we used to have before AI. Yeah, we do, but they're for non-AI features. So I think two things. One, so first of all, my job as a product manager hasn't changed essentially. My primary task is to be in sync with customers, what they struggle with, and their opportunities. That hasn't changed. I need to know what is it our customers would like to do.
But you're probably going more into the ivory tower now than before, aren't you? Just sitting there thinking about AI with your friends.
I would actually say the opposite.
Okay.
Because if I'm still in tune, in sync with our customers, and of course our partners as well, but we also have more communication with customers directly than I think we've had before, which is great because partners also have their filtered view of the world. We need to synthesize all the information.
Yeah.
That's my job. And if I can do that, then I had the opportunity to say, as we talked about earlier, like rethink my current backlog now through a lens of AI. Say, that's one way to look at it. But that's also then a way to say, okay, scratch this backlog that I thought that I had. What are they telling me? Like, what are their issues? What is our gut reaction to, like, you say, oh, I want to improve customer service, then our gut reaction might be X or Y. Like, so, is there? I think what AI has done for us, it's been able to pull forward some of the things we've known for years we would like to do, but didn't, like, either could only do it through sort of classic automation, which would have become maybe a bit clunky, like very strict and very
deterministic,
error prone in a sense. I think now error prone in a different way, but now it seems like we can do that same thing, that same end-to-end process, with a little more wiggle room in the sense, if that makes sense. Like railing the GPT.
So now I wish I knew more about building, but construction, working big. You sort of, your system is like concrete, and then you're adding some flexible layer to withstand earthquakes or something like that. Is that what you're building then? It's a flexible material.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about that as well.
But you have concrete. Then in Japan, if there's an earthquake, they're building it some ways where construction, can sort of. But also, just if you build, any kind of, I can't say these words, but any kind of thing that's sort of where you have two hard ends that have to meet, then you can add something that's flexible in the middle, so it can give and take a little bit. So there's some wiggle room. Is that what AI is in systems?
When we talk agents, they might be, in the sense that if they really have agency and are able to figure out, I mean, for example, the agentic framework we have inside BC is a framework that can navigate the UI in itself by itself. So you give it a task, and it can basically navigate the UI, which also means that if you have custom fields on a given page, it will know about those as well, just because it sees everything. So in that sense, you could say, is that wiggle room compared to just a function call you would normally done, say, click X or do this, perform this function? Yes, in that sense, it's more wiggle room, because now they might, it's able to figure out on its own, or at least try.
It's an ad hoc RPA agent, or it's something where, say, we need to do this. Oh, we could build it around all these, then merge all these data. No, we could also just add the AI agent to.
I think coming back to knowing what to build, of course, there's also an element of experimentation. Like, say, someone, because we now have these tools, it might prompt, no pun intended, but it might prompt new ideas in us.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now with this tool, that means I can do like for example, that thing we talked about before, like you get that invoice coming in, checking that vendor bank account number. Like, there's a non-AI element to that, but there's also some pattern recognitions and things like that, where, like, before AI, that would just, as we talked about, it would need a human in the loop. So I think that's the way it's challenging us, and definitely AI has challenged us definitely challenged me.
Yeah, because it's double, right? Sometimes you think, as you said, we could add AI here. That would make sense. That would seems like the fastest thing to do. But then you also said, oh, but it's taking so much time to do, because you have to test it and test it and test it and test it and test it. So it's a funny, sometimes it's not just a flexible Band-Aid. I'm definitely not hearing from you that it's a Band-Aid solution.
No.
And I think that is very interesting and very different from the way people approached RPA back in the days, like a Band-Aid solution. That's not what you're talking about here at all, because it's way too difficult to do.
It is. And I think we try to be very mindful of the features we dive into, like, because they are time consuming. That's why the whole...
I'm happy you're saying that, thank you.
Yeah. No, but also because there is this kind of preliminary work, like a person like me would have to do my initial prompting to figure out, is there even a feasible way with Copilot to do these things, do my mock-ups in a more visual way, say, this is how it will look, do my human in the loop mapping to say, hey, here's the scenario of the agent user flow we were looking into. This is how it will look before the agent is now. We're looking when the agent is enabled. Like, all these things I have to do in advance, right? To figure out and say, is this even feasible? And then we can figure out, and then of course comes the whole business value. I mean, is this a valuable thing for a business? And that hasn't changed. So the business value conversation is always where it starts and has to start. I don't know, you've talked a lot about the AI strategy in this show. It always starts with, where do you want to go with your business, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same. So coming back to the point where, if I'm in tune, in sync with my customers, then I know, basically my job is to rank opportunities and rank.
But it also sounds like you
problems.
have the most difficult job in the world, right? Well, when thinking about my customers, in principal product owner for Microsoft on a global tool, you have a lot of customers.
Absolutely, and of course
and we can think about their business strategy. You have, you could read from now on till the end of your days.
Yeah, and of course it doesn't scale.
No.
I mean, I would like to. I mean, I book many customer meetings, and I would like to. If you're a customer of PC out there, I would like to talk to you. There, I've said it. But
here's his phone number.
Yeah, no, but true. But I mean, find me on LinkedIn, because I think it's so important, and it's my job to synthesize. So if I speak to 10 customers a given month, it doesn't scale well, but it's so important information.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. But it just informs you in a complete different way, with context.
Absolutely.
To your prompt.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, but we also, I remember we last time when we prepared for this chat as well, we spoke about how can and I think you already touched upon it, but I think it's interesting to phrase it this way, right? Can business support and finance in particular, can they really afford to fail fast when adopting AI?
It's such an interesting question, and it is a dilemma that our customers, like in the space of ERP, business continuity is top of mind. So even before AI, there's a lot of change. I mean, we release a new version every 6 months, right? And you have monthly updates with some minor changes as well. And driving the whole change management part in these businesses, I mean, that's a full-time job. For smaller businesses, where you don't have like anyone to drive that, it's also a challenge. So keeping up with that is definitely already a challenge, something you have to, it's a mindset. Yes, things will change. How can we be at the forefront of, how can we be proactive for our organization and know what is Microsoft releasing and so on. Now comes AI, and you could say that if a feature didn't work as you would expect it to before AI, maybe you just wouldn't use it, or you would get, have a customization built or something like that, or choose an app that could do it for you. But if there's a feature now where it doesn't work, well, sometimes it works. It gives you the result that you like. Sometimes it doesn't, which is the nature. Like, I agree, it's a feature, not a bug, like the creativity of LLMs. But that's a mindset. And until that becomes a natural mindset of all people using these products, there's a risk that if for some reason that third time you use the feature, it doesn't give you the output you want, will you abandon it? Will you never come back to it? I think we don't know. That's, of course, from a product manager perspective, something I think about a lot, because I would like to have very high adoption of new features.
Yeah, but you're also challenging me a little bit here, because I feel the thing that annoys me most about the whole this AI thing is I feel like I'm becoming, even though I'm working with it and I'm very proactive on it and know where to apply it as well, I'm becoming very quickly realizing where I could potentially become a boomer. Right, I'll never be a boomer. I'm from 1983, the smallest generation ever. But the concept of someone who's behind and doesn't want to change his ways, right? Because I don't like when my apps are asking me with AI for stuff. I want to activate, say, and now I want to talk to AI, or I go talk to my assistant somewhere else. I don't want to have it. I'm absolutely annoyed that Word always asks me if I want to draft this with Copilot. No, I don't want to draft this. I'll tell you if I want to draft it with Copilot. Thank you. And but that just means that I feel. But what you're saying is also people need to come to an understanding that this is something that will be everywhere and accept it before it becomes valuable. It just throws a mirror on myself as well. Maybe my kids will be okay with this in a different way, right?
I think you're right, and we're about the same age, so I definitely feel the same way about it. Is there right now in many products a intense marketing on these features, so they show themselves in ways?
Also that, yeah.
So you can imagine 10 years from now where 90% of an application is AI based, then it will just be working with the UI as normal. Then the AI feature wouldn't have to present itself in a very prominent way as it does today. So I think we're in a space now where AI is so new in this sense that, and we would like to have consumption and usage of it. So let's present it in places where users really find them. I think that will change.
That will annoy people as well, right? But it's also the Yari Vadan thing, what you're getting at, where he said that we need to. The reason Google didn't win this was because they thought people wanted reliable, predictable answers. And then suddenly ChatGPT came in and was like, oh, it's okay, we just give people a suggestion. And then one kid was misbehaving in kindergarten, then everyone started misbehaving. That's how he actually phrased it in the episode, right? And he'd been product owner for development of Google Assistant, so he knows his way around those chats, right? And I think that's where I think so many people are still getting accustomed to the fact that machines, like Kurt Cagle said, can now lie. They like I say, they have opinions, and they sometimes have a weird opinion as well, and using it for that. And, it's really, really interesting how that will go. But also, you can answer that if you want.
No, yeah, I mean, it's true. I just want to add a comment to one of the earlier things, was because in Business Central, for example, let's just not talk about the news or sales or agent, which is not out there yet, but we just showed some images of. But for the Copilot features we have now, they're a mix of features where you do a kind of prompting. So describe the sales lines you want to have created, and what you type will heavily impact the result. But you have other Copilot features where we already gave it the input. Now it's just working on it, and we'll produce some output based on whatever structured input we gave it. And I think there might be an expectation that if there's structured input and I wasn't part of the input to the underlying prompt, I would expect it to be very reliable because it's a system, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I gave it a kind of prompt or some input, maybe a part of me would understand why the output wasn't the same every time, because what I write might be different. So I think, but there's so much in the psychology of
and the designing again of human in the loop, right? This is really interesting, right? So we still expect systems to be systems, right?
Yes, and I think that will probably be the key challenge for some time still, until we as a population get this whole thing with LLMs under our skin, even inside business applications. And I think to the point about releasing things, this dilemma with risking someone not using a feature if it's not reliable or doesn't produce the same output every time as they used to with a feature inside Business Central, for example, at least at this point. I think we just have to keep trying. I mean, that shouldn't hold us back. We need to experiment, and the only way to figure out if it's really valuable is to put it out there, get some feedback, and then improve upon it. But that comes back to the whole minimal viable product thing, which I'm not a big subscriber of. In this, I don't think we're set up to do MVP. And ultimately, I can't remember who said this, but I've seen this quote a few times that
evil tongues would say that your early Copilot was an MVP. Don't comment on that if you don't want to.
No, I won't. I won't comment on that, but I will comment on MVP. I can't remember who said this. It's just a quote I saw at some point where that you may decide as builders what's minimum, but the customer will decide if it's viable, right? And there's a Stoic quote as well, say, which is kind of the answer to that, is that well, I can only decide how to shoot. I can't decide if I hit the target, right? So that's out of my hands, right? So, and I think that's basically what we can do. We can try to hit the target best we can, and if it doesn't hit the target and meet the expectations, then we need to try again or do something else. And then they do something else and they fail fast, as you asked me about. That's the challenging part, right? Because once you add code into a business solution, it's sticky.
Yeah, and the solution as broadly adopted as Microsoft Business Central, right?
Yeah, and our answer to that right now, for example, is also to release things in public preview. That hasn't been done much in the past for other features, but for this, we want to do release in public preview because that means we can pull the plug on it tomorrow if we have to, or for some reason we don't think it's valuable enough, right?
Yeah, I see you doing that as well. I saw that also, that you're looking for companies who wants to public preview things.
Right now, have we actually ever pulled the feature that was the public preview? I don't know. I actually don't know, because that's an interesting thing. Will we? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because if you don't, it's not really a public preview, right?
Is it just de facto released when it's a public preview? I don't know. I like to think that it's not. I mean, there's a reason why we do this, and it's not. I mean,
then you can go back with your notes now and say, "And we need to discuss, guys. Are we rejecting? We need to reject something."
But I think it will be interesting to get all the feedback, of course, from the market. I mean, that's ideally, and that, to my point about we speak a lot to customers, is also, and we speak a lot to customers much earlier in the process now than we've probably done ever before, validating the use cases and see, is this really what you would like to do, and also
would this be cool to have
with our MVP.
But you can either, you can just add, like I said in Word, where it comes up and asks you, would you want to draft this with Word? No, I don't. I know in ERPs it's super important that efficiency, the lesser the clicks, that's where you get your efficiency, just getting, so are you adding it like that? Is it asking me on every page, will you want to, or is it just
it depends.
I have to activate?
So it depends. We actually have a very neat, I mean, our design team is super cool. I mean, we have a way where we can say, in this specific page in BC, there's a Copilot feature. Right now, it can sit as a sort of a floating box on top of everything that really advertises itself, but you can sort of minimize it to the menu if you want. So now it stays there. out of sight until you want to use it. So you
Like,
have freedom to.
You're making a Clippy.
Oh, you had to say that, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Finally, Clippy works.
No, but it's. I mean, there are concepts of Clippy that weren't all too bad.
No, but it's a dream of Clippy. Clippy just couldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
But it was just Clippy was like way premature.
Yes.
But now we can actually do Clippy.
Yeah, we can make a good version of Clippy.
Yeah. But you're also saying, you're calling it, you have to, I think it's interesting you're saying that we need to talk AI. We need to say AI. We need to, maybe that's also the only reason companies need to have an AI strategy, is to say, we say AI, we think AI. You need to accept that AI is doing something differently now. It's a different way of working, right? Microsoft calls it Copilot, you're giving it a name. So now suddenly every Microsoft product has Copilot for Business Central, Copilot for. It's just like let's just make our names longer for all our products, right? By adding Copilot to it, and I just think that this adding AI is creating some weird bespoke expectations from people. Also creating that there's some problems with saying AI for AI, because in 5 years people will just have BC, won't they?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean. Okay, there are multiple questions and multiple ways to answer that. So let me first go on the whole AI for AI's sake thing. I don't think that should be done. I think there are two things to this. Like if you're a business and you feel you would like to do stuff with AI, because if you said it in the show a few times, like the competitors are doing it, at least so you hear. As the competitors, and maybe they hear the same and have not done anything yet. But everyone feels as they should be doing things with AI. So on one side, I don't think you should have an AI strategy to dictate what the business should do. Like you should have your business strategy as a decision
Use
framework.
Technology where it's applicable.
Yeah. Then you figure out, is AI going to help us get there? That's one side. But
like you revisiting your backlog and see,
yes,
could
like
we do that with
revisiting
AI? Yeah, exactly.
But I also think there could be value, but I don't think this is an AI strategy. I think there could be value in looking at the world through the lens of AI, like we look through the backlog with the lens of AI. Are there things that other companies are doing that we have simply not thought about now that AI is here? So that's why surfacing all the use cases is something we have to do, so everyone can see, oh, these people over here are addressing an issue. Wait, do we have that same issue in our company? So
also seeing, these are challenges that we maybe discarded 5 years ago.
Yes.
Couldn't do it. Can we do it today? Let's just take our roadmaps back, our heat maps back again, right?
Exactly. So I think you have these two angles.
Have you done that? Taking your backlog and rejected ideas from, or do you ever reject an idea? You do.
I think yes we do. Yeah, I mean we only have so much capacity, right?
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So no, but I think what's happened is that some of these things that we're actually working on now is something. I mean, ERP has always been about automating processes. That's what it's all about.
That's what IT is about. IT is about automating.
Yeah, exactly. Remove the need for clicks.
Yes.
I mean, so if you can remove a click, let's do it. If you can add a batch job that just does instead, great. Let's do it. Right. That's all. So, but it has been sometimes it's been, especially from our perspective, where we don't know about the add-ons you might add on your Business Central, your customizations. It can be hard for us to do an end-to-end automation like this is before AI about a certain process, because then it would assume a lot of stuff, and now that's hard coded in some code. Then you would have to add, customizations and things. Now, and that comes back to the wiggle room.
Yeah,
with AI, we can do a bit more flexible things. We can now stitch together this end-to-end process that we call an agent. I'm not saying an agent is not an agent, it has agency, but let's just say in this case, it's a bunch of sub-processes that is stitched together where the agent knows, the final outcome is down here. We can do that now in a more loose way, it feels, than before, that can take into your account your add-ons, your customizations. Before we would have no chance of doing that. We would strictly code end-to-end what needs to happen.
Yeah, so that's why before you needed actually to be, like I said, a best practice proliferate. Someone who said, this is what everyone does. We only build what everyone does. Now you can say, okay, we'll add a flexibility pace to it. So you can do
and exactly that. And that's why And this is something that we've got some heat on during the years. Like, why isn't that Microsoft, in this case, Business Central, cannot explain what is best practice? Well, that's because we don't know your industry.
No, but you do it anyway.
We
de facto.
We do on a more sort of horizontal basis, but we don't go into specifics. But I think that's the expectation. Like, I now start a new, like my dentist clinic. I don't know why I use that example. Maybe that's a reminder. I start my dentist clinic. I need to buy or figure out what should be our new software. Would they expect what is the best practice for a dentist?
Yeah, so they come and expect the verticals from something that is in essence a horizontal tool.
Yes, and I think, but that's also our strength, right? Is because we have an amazing partner network who does all these things. But sometimes people look to Microsoft for these best practices.
But I always say to people, I always do this Anna Karenina quote, every happy company is happy. No, every happy family is the same. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That's how Anna Karenina starts, right? And to some extent, every company is also on digital in its own way, right? It's they need to have different, vendors, different clients, different mother company, sister company, daughter company setups, different regulations, company geographies, all that, which is why they exist, right? So it's really difficult to go to someone who is basically making the most horizontal software in the world, an ERP system, global ERP system, and demand for them to understand how my clients are interacting with my particular daughter company setup that I have out of the Faroe Islands. Which is outside the EU, but part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It's like, whoa,
Totally. And I think what you just said there, like, we need to, like, Business Central is a super flexible solution, and we can accommodate for all kinds of businesses and so on.
But that also means you don't accommodate for anything in particular.
No, exactly. For everything. Exactly. We need to refrain from doing some very specific, and because you might think, oh, that's all it can do, right? So we need to be kind of a horizontal. But it's super interesting what you just said. Like, so many companies will say, oh, we're super special. We have these special processes, and that's how it works for us. And I'm pretty sure in many cases that's true. But I'm also very sure that in many cases, these companies we could make them work great in a standard Business Central.
A lot of things companies do are commodity, and a lot of the things they don't think is a commodity, that they think is a commodity, is not. So that's where consultants like me come in, right?
Yes.
Figuring out, telling them, hey, guys, what you're doing here, everyone's doing that. You can do that with this system.
Yes.
And what you're expecting of your software here, that's actually something only you do. You need to build a bespoke solution. So that's where they need someone like us, because we just, consultants to some extent, we are the flexible pace between companies, right? That's the only thing we do.
Yes. Exactly.
So but I just think that you said you don't talk AI. You said that. I just want you also said that people need to start thinking. Just go back on that. Thinking AI, thinking that expecting these preview answers, suggestive answers. So we need to say the word AI all the time for the next couple of years. But hopefully we'll stop doing that. Is that is that where you are at, or?
I think, and this is my personal thoughts about, like, because in 10 years, who knows what happens in 10 years, right? We have no clue. But in 10 years from now...
It's also crazy to be in a position where we have no clue in 10 years, right?
Yes, totally. I mean, and you could say, well, you determine what happens in 10 years, right? You could look at me and say that. But it's... maybe AI will be so much all over the place that we don't think of it. Like, right now, it's very visible because, as I said, it sort of pops up.
It's hyped, and we need to understand the way it thinks and how the way it works. Yes.
Will we have to do that in 10 years? I hope not. I hope it would just become
AI is what you can't do with computers, right? What you can do with computers is called software. That's how we used to. That's why I'm saying maybe it will be BC again, not BC with Copilot.
I think it will be an ingrained part of applications. I mean, and you don't, at that point in time, you don't think about it being AI or Copilot anymore. Is that 10 years, is that 5 years or 20 years? I don't know, but I think we'll reach that point at some point.
So, do you think that the companies that you're working with and the departments, also the accounting departments, are they prepared for these changes that AI is bringing to the table? Right? We've also spoken a little bit about, roles and responsibilities, you and me, before, chatted a little bit before. Is this a thing for the CIO or the CDO? But let's just first say, companies and people prepare for it, and then dive into the organizational thing.
In general, well, hard to speak for the entire customer population, right? But I think you have some who are. I think you have many who are not, that are still just not even in a digital transformation journey. I mean, they're still on-prem. They haven't even thought about these things yet. They can't avoid hearing about it, of course, but that doesn't mean that they're ready for it. And ready, does that, do you mean ready in the terms of, do they demand now, would they like to have AI, or ready in the terms of, are they actually ready in terms of, they have their data in order, and
you're answering the question here. Can they handle it? Can they handle it? Do you have the data for it? Do they have the people who will understand it? Is the bookkeeper the last one to get a prompt engineering course?
Yeah. And here Business Central specifically may be different from many other things, because here features are out of the box, right? They don't present themselves as, oh, now you need to be a prompt engineer to make this work. No, these features work naturally in the flow of your work.
Because it has to be so quick all the time.
It has to be so quick, and has to be they're oriented around business and business processes. It's not a blank canvas, right? They have a purpose. This feature, this specific feature on this specific page you're looking at, has a specific purpose that advertises itself. You click it, you see what comes out of it, right? So it doesn't require a lot of thought process to start using these features. So in that sense, I think we're in a much better place than a classic machine learning project where you had to get a data scientist and first have to figure out, I wonder what I would use this for. That's not the case. What you use it for is evident as soon as you see it in Business Central, which I think gives an advantage in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. But that also means that it's. I think that's interesting. The speed, the speed in an ERP system, you have to be quick. You have to be able to move quickly around it. So you can't have this weird prompting session. Certainly. I didn't understand your, the way you were prompting. It has to be productivity. It has to be very on feature, on point all the time.
We have that other thing also, in the sense we have a Copilot chat,
of course,
pane inside BC, which is relatively new, where you can ask it to do a number of things that then works asynchronously while you do whatever you do.
Like they did for Azure and all the other tools as well, right?
Yeah, you could say that. And this is bound to your business entities. So you could say, hey, show me the top 5 products we sold to this customer.
And then it just basically generates a SQL command.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So that intersection between interpreting that prompt, figuring out what is the underlying actual code we need to execute to find that thing, and then I think the very cool thing which we've done lately is to now making the connection between the chat pane and the actual, let's say, business page you're looking at very clear, very bound. So you can now click on some of these search results, and then it would open up, and maybe we would highlight a field that you've clicked on or something like that. So that's and there will be more and more of that. So in that sense, and I kind of joke internally with that, is that, well, isn't now my Copilot chat a kind of agent for me, because I now tell it to do things? It's not, of course, in our definition, but in my view, you ask someone to do something for you on my behalf. It's an agent,
and it's also,
but it's not the official.
But also, then you come back to the whole automation bias issue. Where is it giving me? Here are the 3 things you should look at today. But what if there were 5 things? So what if I had only found 2? Stuff. These questions, right? And then people that's the danger of LLMs, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
danger, right?
When Copilot summarizes your meeting and do the takeaways, I haven't actually tried it yet to
but that's good.
The meeting and
but that's good, because of course some people are taking very, very notes from meetings and summaries. A lot of people are not, and just getting something here is better than having nothing. So that's okay. But when you're sitting suddenly and you're asking it, what emails should I look at today, and it has this, because these LLMs have a tendency to say, they give a certain length out. They don't. Maybe I have 100 emails, I should look at it, but it will never, ever give me 100 emails. It will tell me 10 max, maybe 15, if a lot. That's a lot. But that's not all I had to look at, right? I should have looked at 100 emails, but Copilot told me 5 was enough.
But that comes back to the whole thing about how are people working with these features, and I think on the positive side, people are getting used to this.
They need to know that it does this. Yes.
Yes, people are getting used to this kind of creativity from LLMs these days in almost everywhere. So I think in the business application concept, this is not new.
But isn't it only in not only, of course, but isn't it primarily in Scandinavia, right? That people are getting so used to it. When I talk to people from other parts of the world, they haven't touched these technologies as much.
I think it depends a lot on who those people are and what they work with, I think.
Yeah, of course. But accountants, bookkeepers from Argentina, are they?
You can find those anywhere, also in Denmark, who haven't at all. Yeah. I mean, they haven't maybe done their first prompt.
So that's why we need to accept that we need to push more AI and still ask AI to be something that supports the rest of what we want to do.
Yes, I think, yeah, I mean,
at the same time.
Exactly. And I think right now you probably can't avoid the term Copilot. I think we just need to keep pushing, but I also think we need to create something of value. We need to show that there is something here. It actually can help me in my job. It can help me do my job better, faster, and so on. So I think we need to do that also in a business context, not only, and I don't mean it in any bad way, but not only in Teams and Word and Outlook. We need to show value also by. One of the classic issues in ERP is that you have siloed data within your ERP. Like, you need to know where to go and do that extra 3 lookups, those 3 clicks to find that ledger information or whatever. Like, the summary components, the summarizations will be super useful as well inside ERP, because it will give you that probably the most valuable information from this entity you're looking at, plus the ecosystem of entities.
And sorry, now you just made me think that this was actually the question I wanted to ask you as well. And I know we've spoken for a long time now.
No
but because we had this whole with the roles and responsibilities in a company, right? So an ERP system is very much centered around finance and CFOs. But suddenly you can say we should. For instance, I do that. You said that's also with contracts, right? You can look at a contract for a due date or payment terms, and then you can look at your invoice and say, do they match, right? So, do you need to start working with all of these contract management tools and the CRMs and much broader, much bigger? Is Business Central now becoming, as a term, as a concept for Microsoft, and inhibiting silo to make the broader AI adoption that we actually need to do, where we start working across everything?
I would like to think not, let alone like just because of our API connectivity and our connectivity across the suite of applications. So I think as long as we have that going on, I think we can expose. If you mean like Business Central data can be exposed to.
Yeah, but I know they can, right? But I'm also saying that the agents you're building, right? Shouldn't they be agents that work across, like the Copilot thing? Then Copilot will need to get way deeper into business. Then suddenly you have multiple teams. Is that are you working on that?
But that is what Copilot Studio is intended to do. So Copilot Studio will be your master orchestrator of your company-wide agents. So that is where you say, "Oh, give me this from Business Central." Correlate that with our knowledge base on SharePoint and do a third thing or in Power.
Then I need to build that up, right? But if we say that AI is a cross silo thing, that you can now do things across silos. I think a lot of people are saying that as well. Now this is where new businesses will be built around AI, and it will not have these silos, right? How are you approaching that? Are Microsoft even approaching that, or are you just saying you can do it? That's where you have the Power Platform. There you go. Have fun. There's the capabilities for whatever. But you are, as you said, Business Central, you are actually designing the process, right, as well. And now you'll have processes that go beyond just Business Central with AI. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I see where you're getting at. And I think Business Central might be in a special place in that sense, because it is an end-to-end business solution. Like, we also do project management. You could say within Business Central, you have a projects module and so on. So in that sense, we already cover most of the rooms of the house.
Your contract management software as well?
Sorry?
A contract management software?
No. So no, exactly. No, and I think that's why that's
should Business Central become the one ring to rule them all? Is that what you're saying?
So if you're really asking, are we across Microsoft going to ditch all products and just build out some capabilities on Dataverse that handles everything?
Copilot. Microsoft is Copilot.
No silos. I think that's a very far-fetched thing, but I think
Copilot soft.
Let's not go there. I think best we can do right now is to, and I think that's an okay way to look at it, is like the Copilot Studio will be the orchestrator. As long as you have good connectivity into whatever backend you're using, you can do that kind of thing that you mentioned in the beginning, where you could say you have a chat and you just have some backend systems that serve up data, and you can interact with and have the agent go pull whatever data and do whatever updates it has to do. I don't see that being a limiting factor. I mean, I think it's easy to overestimate what it takes to say, oh, there are no silos. You can just go and pull data from anywhere. Yeah.
My point is also just, I think you get what I'm getting at. I also understand what you're saying. You're saying Copilot Studio. I'm saying the whole Power Platform is this kind of, flexible paste as well, right? But my point is just, when the ERP came out, it was to say, okay, all of these things that were disparate, maybe processes before, let's pull it into an enterprise resource planning software, right? So what is the next iteration of that? That is my question, right?
Oh yeah, okay. So you're speaking to someone who was part of ERP since '97. So I've seen this a few times. Like back then, everything went into the ERP. Whatever you could imagine, let's build it in the ERP. Let's add new.
Come back again?
I don't think so. I think we went too far. You never say never. Okay, never say never. But I think we went too far down the API story, like the separate system story, and the maturity of that technology in itself, like API technology. And now with LLM to be able to consume endpoints and what have you, I think there would be no reason to consolidate. At least not for that reason. Then it would be for other kinds of reasons where you find that it's easier to manage, security and that kind of thing. If for some reason,
it's just the out of the box cross. And the ERP works out of the box across everything, right? There's something here. There's just something here, We could invent the new ERP because enterprise resources are more than what you have in the ERP system.
You have it in the sense where we were like for some of the Microsoft products where we build first-party integrations to some other Microsoft products. So in that sense, it's what you're asking. Like, you have Business Central from the get-go integrating natively with Dynamics 365 Sales, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is some of that. But taking that to the full extent, that would require.
And then you have the agents across all of it.
Yes.
And a contract management software, and
And I think right now to accelerate that, because those integrations, one, are hard to build, time-consuming to build. They're easily technical debt because now something changes in sales. Now Business Central needs to keep up. Like the outside-in approach with a Copilot Studio, where it can consume both systems, could make more sense. So as long as all these systems are API enabled, it's easier for something on the outside to act on behalf of those systems. Or those
I get that, but maybe something will come up. If every company should be built around AI, maybe the software company should also be built around Copilot, and then all of these logics. You see, but it's just I'm just looking at the silos also in the concepts of systems, right?
But you make me think about it. So not to change the topic, but you made me think about this thing we talked about with the roles where is it that AI is placed within an organization where right now just a small anecdote, like back in the mid-90s, I worked at a warehouse, and one day I had dropped a mini disc. Yes, I actually had a mini disc player, and I loved it.
I had too. Yeah.
I loved it. I dropped a mini disc on the warehouse, and the day after I came to the warehouse manager saying, hey, have you seen this small thing? It's a small disc. Oh, that disc. Yeah, I went up to IT because I thought it was some of theirs. And my point is, when something smells of tech, we always look at IT. We look at the CIO and says, oh, this is your domain. And I'm not sure that is right for AI in particular. If every company produces data as part of their operations, should the possibilities of AI and the whole digital theme within a company, if every company can be a digital company, should that be placed at the COO level, like the Chief Operations Officer? Should that be should we ramp up that person to be a Chief Digital Operations Officer or something like that?
Yeah.
to not have this chief digital officer or innovation, hubs as a sort of a side note, or like an add-on.
They're taking it
Like,
seriously, right? Putting it into
into the core of the operations. I think that's an intriguing thought.
Well, we're typically placing it somewhere where CIOs are, often a cost center, right? But putting it into something that will become a profit center as well.
Yes, absolutely.
That's interesting, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of having it, then it will become, just some sub-optimizing productivity, which we already discussed, right? But maybe we could do more with it, right? Maybe we could actually generate something new with it instead.
Yeah, and the best person maybe right now, if you're a company large enough to have a COO, maybe that's the person, like deeply integrated in all processes and knows everything about the company.
There's also a lot of companies, especially SMBs, right, where the CFO is merged with the CFO, right?
Yes.
So there's this. It already exists to some extent, right? But I just think that what you're trying to get at here is to sort of combat the innovation theater that Thora talked about as well, right? Let's not put AI somewhere where it's just this weird investment we've made under the CIO, but let's put it somewhere where we say we expect this to change things for us going forward, right?
Yeah, and I don't mean in a way where you shouldn't have a place where you can experiment. Like, it's fine to have like groups where you can do some experiments, but it can still be ingrained within or be rooted in the operations, I think.
And the operation logics and the operation demands and the operation challenges, right? That's the business challenges. Instead of having someone just saying, because you often end up with someone who's often young people as well, right? Sitting there thinking, and they have never really produced. Let's not get down to that. But anyway, but Søren, I think this has been an absolutely terrific episode of The Only Constant. I'm so happy you took the time to explain to me what Microsoft is doing and how you think of it, and how also, of course, my podcast will make you think about it and allow me to ask you all these weird questions. So I think this has been absolutely brilliant. I have actually two questions. The first one is, I always say to people, you will not get AI in your NAV 2009. Can you confirm or deny that?
You cannot get it from Microsoft, at least. No.
Thank you very much.
No. It's cloud only.
It's modernized, exactly. And then the final question. Are you ready for it? And you know which one it is.
I'm ready for it, yes. I think.
So, Søren, what is the only constant?
I can't have two answers, but it's the same answer. It's just a very short one and a longer one. And I think I already said it. The only constant is no one wants to do the dishes. Like that's just a fact. The long-winded answer, and I'd like to take this somewhere I've been thinking a lot about lately. So, as you know, because I sent the episode to you, I'm a big fan of James Burke, the science historian, a scientist. He has this idea that he believes that within the turn of the century, there will be no more scarcity. Basically, you and I, everyone, can produce whatever we want by having these nanofabricators. So using the elements all around us, we basically produce what we want. So all the stuff that we are now discussing right now, business issues, productivity, will be a thing of the past. He even goes so far and says there'll be no more groups, which I'm not sure I believe in, because psychology tells us that we'll always form groups, them and us, over the smallest of things. But he really believes this thing with end of scarcity. Like, he actually said within 50 or 60 years. That's just a very thought-provoking, like, for me, I would like to believe it, but I can't help wonder if that really becomes the case. Because, no, where I want to take this is, we discuss a lot about, and you've done this in the show as well, where do we want to take all this productivity? Where will it lead to? What is that we want as the outcome? Like, now I'm a proponent of universal basic income. So I think a future where we don't have to work necessarily, all of us, in the same way that we do today, I think that could be a good future. But what he's saying is that if what he thinks is going to be true, going to happen, like end of scarcity, we should put much more time into thinking about how will we interact in such a world. How will you and I behave when there's no more scarcity? Like, I don't need to buy anything from you. You don't need to buy anything from me. We all have what we need. We need to find other ways to fulfill our lives. And right now, that can seem just so far out there when we talk about productivity and drafting emails like that are better. But it's just super interesting that he thinks that that's a possibility. So I think what I spend a lot of time thinking on these days is I hope that if we get those nanofabricators that he's talking about, that everyone will have the opportunity, that it's not just you and I sitting here in our, no, it's not an ivory tower, but I can look out the window. It's a very nice place. Like, will the entire world have access to these resources? So when we talk about productivity, I also think about productivity for whom, because I also know that now I glorify the dishwasher. Well, there are people in the world who don't have a dishwasher or don't even have access to clean drinking water. So trying to be mindful of that, and how does that play into my work in BC, in Business Central? Well, I think about these things. I think about, are we de-skilling someone? Are we de-skilling the accountants by now bringing in an agent that does some of their work? I hope not. I hope they move up the value chain, but I think it's still to be proven. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer of no one wants to do the dishes. We will always try to find new ways to automate things, and there's no end to human desire.
So you just, here in the final answer, you just opened so many more questions. But I love your final constant. Your only constant is that no one wants to do the dishes, and your whole considerations around what we will do and where we'll be as humans in the long run. I think that's a brilliant consideration to end this brilliant episode with. Thank you so much for being here, Søren, and thank you for being part of The Only Constant. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Lasse. Anytime.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.